Sometimes you hear about a military victory that's just so brilliant, so out there, it sounds completely impossible. Like, how could a normal person even think of that? Well, today, we're diving into the story of a general who is famous for exactly that, Minamoto no Yoshitsune. We're talking about a 12th century samurai whose genius on the battlefield was so legendary, it literally became, well, a legend.
So that's the big question, right? Was this guy just an absolute once-in-a-generation military genius? Or was there something else going on? Something, a little more supernatural.
Okay, so during this massive conflict called the Jinpei War, which, by the way, completely changed the course of Japanese history, Yoshitsune's tactics were just otherworldly. They broke every rule in the book. His enemies were just constantly getting outplayed in ways they couldn't even begin to understand. And that's when people started to whisper, maybe his skills didn't come from a normal dojo. Maybe they came from someplace a lot more mysterious.
And that mystery? It actually has a name. The story that everyone started to believe was that Yoshitsune was actually a student of the occult, that he was trained in what they called the Tengu secret arts by these mythical, bird-like mountain spirits from Japanese folklore, the Tengu. Right, so this is where we get to the core idea, Tengu Guge. This became the lens through which everyone saw him. See, the idea wasn't just that he was an amazing swordsman. No, it was that he had learned these supernatural techniques straight from the king of the Tengu, a being named Sojobo, up on the sacred Mount Kurama. So let's take a look at how this crazy legend actually played out on the battlefield.
First up, we have what you could call the art of verticality. And this was on full display at the Battle of Ichinotani. This is where Yoshitsune just completely flipped the script on what was even possible in warfare.
So, get this. The Taira clan, his enemies, they're all hunkered down in this fortress. And it's protected by this insane cliffside called the Hyorodori-go. I mean, everyone agreed it was totally impassable. No army could get down it, and definitely not on horseback. So, what was Yoshitsune's brilliant idea? Yeah, attack straight down that very cliff.
And this quote just perfectly captures his whole way of thinking. When his own men were like, no way, we can't do that, he supposedly just said, if a deer can descend it, so can a horse. It's just a total rejection of conventional wisdom, right? He saw a path where everyone else just saw a dead end.
And here's where it gets really interesting, how people interpreted this. His cavalry charging down that insane cliff, people didn't just see it as a bold move. No, to the people watching, it looked like they were literally flying. This was seen as proof positive that he was using the Tengu's power to master the vertical world, to just ignore gravity.
But Yoshitsune's unbelievable skills weren't just for dry land. Oh no. His next legendary move, which happened during the final massive naval battle of the war, shows off what we can call the art of agility.
8. Just remember that number. Because in the middle of a chaotic sea battle, that single number came to define a truly impossible act. It's all about the Hasotobi, which means the 8-boat leap. The story goes that this giant enemy warrior finally had Yoshitsune cornered. It was the end of the line. But instead of fighting, Yoshitsune, while wearing full heavy armor, mind you, just casually leaped across 8 different ships to get away. It was an absolutely mind-bending display of agility.
And you guessed it, there was a supernatural explanation all ready to go for this one too. It was a Tengu art called shukuchi. The idea here is that a warrior can move so fast, so lightly, that space itself seems to just fold. Distances shrink. So from that perspective, he wasn't just jumping, he was literally bending space. Wild, right?
But Yoshitsune's supposed training with the Tengu wasn't just about physical power. Not at all. It shaped his entire way of thinking, his strategy, which leads us to our next point, the art of illusion.
And this really gets to the core of his genius. See, samurai warfare back then had this super strict code of honor. Formal duels, predictable rules of engagement, the whole shebang. Yoshitsune, he didn't play by those rules. He was all about what worked. Take this. He ordered his archers to target the enemy's ship rowers, basically non-combatants. Totally dishonorable, but devastatingly effective. In the context of the Tengu arts, this was him shattering the illusion of honor to get to the cold, hard reality of how to win a war.
He was also an absolute master of psychological warfare. His whole game wasn't just about outfighting the enemy, it was about outthinking them, making them beat themselves with their own fear and confusion. And there's no better example of this than the Battle of Yashima.
I mean, check out how simple and brilliant this was. He shows up with just a handful of cavalry, but at night, he lights these massive bonfires all along the shore. The Taira look out from their ships and think a gigantic army has just landed. He basically created a spirit army out of nothing but fire and shadows. And the Taira fleet, even though they had way more men, completely panicked and sailed away. That's classic Tengu stuff right there. Total mastery of perception.
So you've got the vertical cavalry charge, the 8-boat leap, the army made of shadows. All of these stories fed into this incredible narrative. But it makes you wonder, why did the myth become so much bigger than the man himself? Well, a huge part of it is that Yoshitsune's story has a tragic ending. He was ultimately betrayed by his own brother and died way too young. And maybe, for the people of Japan, it was just easier to believe his incredible skills were some kind of divine gift. It's more comforting than accepting that a human genius that bright could be snuffed out so tragically.
When you get right down to it, the legend of the Tengu served a really important purpose. It gave people a story, a way to make sense of something that seemed totally impossible. I mean, how could one small, slight man bring down one of the most powerful clans in the entire country and rewrite history? Maybe the answer was he couldn't, not on his own. But with the secret arts of the mountain spirits on his side, well, then anything was possible.
And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on, doesn't it? When you're talking about someone like Yoshitsune, whose actual life was so epic it already sounds like a myth, where do you even draw that line? How much of it is history and how much is legend? And at what point does a hero's story get so big it doesn't even belong to them anymore, but to the ages?